Democratic House prosecutors argued in U.S. President Donald Trump's impeachment trial today that he was swept up by a completely bogus Ukraine theory pushed by attorney Rudy Giuliani that led to his abuse of presidential power and then impeachment. Your playlist will load after this ad. Democrats say the president abused his power and obstructed Congress. Source: US ABC. As the Democrats pressed their case for a second day before skeptical Republican Senate jurors, they displayed video images of the nation's top FBI and Homeland Security officials, warning the public off the theory that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 election. It was just one of 10 separate ways, the prosecutors argued, that Mr. Trump abused power for his own personal political benefit ahead of the 2020 election, the first article of impeachment against him. That's what Donald Trump wanted investigated or renounced, this completely bogus Kremlin-pushed conspiracy theory, said Rep. Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee who is leading the prosecution. Mr. Trump is accused of seeking the investigation, and probes the political foe Joe Biden and Mr. Biden's son, while holding back congressionally approved military aid as leverage. Mr. Schiff said, "You can imagine what a danger that presents to this country." Mr. Trump is facing trial in the Senate after the House impeached him last month, accusing him of abusing his office by asking Ukraine for the investigations while withholding the aid from a U.S. ally at war with bordering Russia. Your playlist will load after this ad, but Republicans show no sign of being moved by the arguments, U.S. correspondent Rebecca Wright reports. Source: One News. The second article of impeachment accuses him of obstructing Congress by refusing to turn over documents or allow officials to testify in the House probe. Republicans, growing tired of the long hours of proceedings, have defended Mr. Trump's actions as appropriate and cast the process as a politically motivated effort to weaken him in the midst of his re-election campaign. Republicans hold a 53-47 majority in the Senate, and acquittal is considered likely. The Democrats' challenge is clear as they try to convince not just fidgety senators but an American public divided over the Republican president in an election year. With Chief Justice John Roberts presiding, Democrats argued today that Mr. Trump's motives were apparent. No president has ever used his office to compel a foreign nation to help him cheat in our elections, Rep. Gerald Nadler of New York, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, told the senators. He said the nation's founders would be shocked. The president's conduct is wrong, is illegal, it is dangerous. They scoffed at Mr. Trump's claim he had good reasons for pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political foes. It was Mr. Trump who engaged in a shocking abuse of power, not former Vice President Biden or other Trump foes, said Rep. Sylvia Garcia of Texas. There is no evidence, nothing, nada, to suggest that Mr. Biden did anything improper in dealings with Ukraine, said the former judge. Your playlist will load after this ad. One News U.S. correspondent Rebecca Wright is at Capitol Hill. Source: One News. Mr. Trump, with Mr. Giuliani, pursued investigations of Mr. Biden and his son, Hunter, who served on a Ukrainian gas company's board, and sought the probe of debunked theories of what nation was guilty of interference in the 2016 U.S. election. On dual tracks, Democrats prosecuted their case while answering in advance the arguments expected from the president's attorneys in the days ahead. At one point, they showed video of a younger Lindsey Graham, then a South Carolina congressman and now a GOP senator allied with Trump, arguing during Bill Clinton's 1999 impeachment that no crime was needed for impeaching a president. Mr. Trump's defense team is now arguing that the impeachment articles against the president are invalid because they do not allege he committed a specific crime. The president's defenders waited their turn, which may come on Sunday. We will be putting on a vigorous defense of both facts, rebutting what they said, and the Constitution, said attorney Jay Sekulow. Ahead of the day's proceedings, Sen. Roy Blunt of Missouri said the Democrats were putting forward admirable presentations, but he said, they've basically got about 1 hour of presentation, and they gave it 6 times on Tuesday and 8 times yesterday. There's just not much new here. The top Senate Democrat, Chuck Schumer, acknowledged that many senators really don't want to be here. But Mr. Schumer said Mr. Schiff has been outlining a compelling case that many Republicans are hearing for only the first time. He contended they can't help but be glued to his testimony. Once reluctant to take on impeachment during an election year, Democrats are now marching toward a decision by the Senate that the American public also will judge. Mr. Trump blasted the proceedings in Tweet Today tweet, declaring them the most unfair. After the House prosecutors finish, likely tomorrow, the president's lawyers will have as long as 24 hours. It's unclear how much time they will actually take, but Mr. Trump's team is not expected to finish on Sunday, according to a person unauthorized to discuss the planning and granted anonymity. The Senate is expected to take only Monday off and push into next week. After that, senators will face the question of whether they do, or do not, want to call witnesses to testify. Your playlist will load after this ad. One News U.S. correspondent Rebecca Wright runs through what's happening. Source: breakfast senators were permitted today to review supplemental testimony submitted by an aide to Vice President Mike Pence, Jennifer Williams, who testified in the House impeachment inquiry, and was among those who had concerns about Mr. Trump's actions. Democrats said the supplemental testimony, which is classified, bolsters their impeachment case. A lawyer for Ms. Williams declined to comment. Holding the room's attention has been difficult for the Democrats, but senators seemed to pay closer mind to Mr. Schiff's testimony that grew dramatic. Most senators, even Republicans, sat at their desks throughout the afternoon session, as the rules stipulate, and not as many of them were yawning or standing up to stretches during the previous long nights. To help senators pass the time, the Republican chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr of North Carolina, passed out lunch favors of fidget spinners, stress balls and other toys. Democrats took a gracious tack, thanking the senators for their time and patience, acknowledging the repetition of some of their presentations. The impeachment trial is set against the backdrop of the 2020 election. 4 senators who are Democratic presidential candidates are off the campaign trail, seated as jurors. A new poll from the Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research showed the public slightly more likely to say the Senate should convict and remove Mr. Trump from office than to say it should not, 45% to 40%. But a sizable percentage, 14%, said they didn't know enough to have an opinion. One issue with wide agreement: Mr. Trump should allow top aides to appear as witnesses at the trial. About 7 in 10 said so, including majorities of Republicans and Democrats, according to the poll. The strategy of more witnesses, though, seemed all but settled. Republicans rejected Democratic efforts to get Trump aides, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, to testify in back-to-back votes earlier this week. Senators were likely to repeat that rejection next week, shutting out any chance of new testimony before they take a final vote. Let's block ads.